Welcome to Round Glass. Thanks for joining me in this meditation on 6 attitudes for inner peace. I'm Sarah Blackburn. In some traditions, inner wisdom is the highest goal of the entire tradition. And in this session, we'll unpack the meaning of that word. First, from the perspective of the lineage that I've studied in Tibetan Buddhism. And then I'll share some ways that you can use this particular understanding of wisdom to make it meaningful for you and apply it to your own life so that wisdom has a special meaning for you. So I'd like to start by inviting you to think about what wisdom means for you. When you hear that word, what do you think of? And I'll also share this session is the 6th of 6 sessions in a whole series around cultivating certain inner attitudes that will have an effect on our peace of mind and therefore affect our entire sense of well-being and happiness. So in this particular session, I'll start by discussing this idea of wisdom. And then, like I said, we'll broaden it out so that you can apply it to your own life or find your own meaning of wisdom and find it to be hopefully as practical as you can make it. So let's begin with that idea of wisdom. In this particular context that I'm sharing from, the Tibetan Buddhist lineage, wisdom is the antidote. It's what combats this thing called ignorance. And by ignorance, it's referring to the fact that there are things that we don't understand about ourselves and the world. And because of that lack of understanding, it causes us to suffer. And so wisdom steps in and helps us have a better understanding of ourselves and of our world and our reality. And so, again, back to that idea of ignorance, that thing we don't understand. They say that ignorance is a mistaken idea that there is something outside of us that could bring us happiness. So thinking that if we get more chocolate cake, for example, then we'll be happy. Or thinking that if we just had a better partner, somehow that other person could bring us happiness. However, you may have found that that doesn't always work. At least for me, if I eat too much chocolate cake, it starts to make me very sick. And so wisdom is pointing us in a direction that says happiness is something that comes from inside us, not outside of us. And in fact, that happiness is even created by us. How is that? Well, the master meditators say that there is no fixed interpretation for our world. That, for instance, say that you had an angry boss at your workplace and you find that the boss is yelling at you. I know I've had this experience where a boss is upset, they start to yell at me and I feel really bad. But wisdom is saying that there could be other interpretations of what's happening in that moment and that they're all valid. A colleague could witness the exact same exchange between me and a boss, and they could feel happy instead of sad and upset. They could think, Sarah's finally getting what she deserves. And yet another colleague might have an even different interpretation that's neutral, where they don't care really what's happening. So how we're forced to interpret the boss depends on what's in our mind at that moment. And the idea is that the interpretation, the way we experience it, is created by a previous moment of our consciousness where we said something or did something or even had a thought that was in some way similar. The implication here is that the things that we say, the things we do, and the way that we act puts an imprint in our mind, much like cause and effect in our physical world and our belief in science. The words and actions and thoughts must have a consequence. And that consequence creates our future experience of the world because the action puts an impression in our mind. It's much like the idea that an apple seed must produce an apple tree. You wouldn't get lemons from an apple seed. And that the actual tree itself is much bigger than the seed. So a small moment of anger could grow over time and produce many moments of anger. Only out in our world, in the way that we interpret that boss yelling at us over and over and over with anger. The good news is that if we can understand this idea, then it also applies to the good things in our life. That those moments of kindness will leave an impression on the mind in the same way that moments of anger would. And so if we fill our mind with kindness and love and compassion, that too will force us to interpret our world as being full of love and kindness and compassion. If you've ever heard this saying that what goes around comes around, it's very similar to that principle. So with that idea of wisdom from this particular perspective, let's do a meditation on it and start to see how we could apply that to our lives in a way that would be meaningful and helpful. So to begin the meditation, find a comfortable position that you can sit in for the next 12 to 15 minutes. Oftentimes that means a nice straight spine, relaxed shoulders, and a connection to the foundation. So your chair or your cushion, plant your feet on the floor. Really feel what's supporting your meditation. And then let your eyes fall closed when you're ready. And let's begin by beginning to withdraw from the outer stimuli. Letting any other sounds or distractions pass through your meditation. And bring your attention to your body. Start to look for any lingering tension. If you're still holding any busyness from what you were doing previously, or even from earlier in the week, start to let that physical busyness and chatter start to settle. And so relax through the areas that are often tense. Soften through your face. Let your shoulders relax. And let those impulses to fidget or move start to lose their power as you bring the breath to the forefront of the mind, and those nagging sensations will have to wait on the peripheral of your awareness. And then check in with the lingering speech in the mind. Let go of the verbal chit-chat, the snippets of previous conversations, or even the running themes that race through the mind of phrases you say to yourself. Let that verbal chit-chat start to lose its power. Let it fade to the outskirts of your awareness. And keep those sensations of breath at the center of your attention. And then finally, let any visual chatter, the pictures, images, faces that run through your mind also start to lose their strength. They fade into the background of your mind. And the breath becomes the centerpiece, the primary focus of your attention. We'll take a few moments here just to follow the air entering and exiting your body. And now we'll begin a meditation on this concept of wisdom. So bring to mind the image of a pen. And as you think of a pen, that simple writing tool, don't get too philosophical about it. Just think about a pen and the function it serves. What is a pen? How do you use it? What are all of the things that make it a pen? And then ask yourself, if a dog came into the room and saw that same object, what is the object then? Is it pen for a dog, Or is it a chew toy for a dog? And then imagine that you leave the room, the dog leaves the room, but that object stays. What is the object when there's no dog, when there's no human? Is the object pen? Or is the object chew toy? What is that thing with no perceiver? Now picture the dog coming back in the room. When the dog sees that object, what is it then? And then when you come back in the room and you see that same object, what is it then? And ask yourself, is pen coming from the plastic cylinder? Or is chew toy coming from that same plastic cylinder? Does the object possess chew toy or pin inside of it? Does pen radiate out from the object? Does chew toy jump out of the object into the perceiver? If so, wouldn't all minds have to experience the plastic cylinder in the same way if somehow it possessed those qualities in and of itself? Now reconnect to that idea of wisdom, the suggestion that objects come from the perceiver, the idea that my mind influences my perception of the objects in my world. Now consider in that moment of anger, when your consciousness witnesses you frustrated with a partner, a colleague, a family member, how will that make an impression on your own mind? Could previous instances of anger play a role in the interpretation of someone angry at us in the future, like a yelling boss? And if actions have consequences, could the opposite also be possible? Ask yourself what a moment of kindness would do to your own mind. How would it have results in the moment towards others? And how would moments of kindness leave a lasting imprint on your mind that later forced an interpretation of a world filled with kindness? And so take another moment or two to connect to this idea of wisdom. Ask yourself how it correlates to your own understanding of the word, of the meaning. And then what are some ways that you could bring about more wisdom in your own mind to alleviate some of the misunderstanding that causes pain? And now let go of any judgment or any lingering thoughts of the meditation, and bring your mind back to your body breathing. Notice the sounds around you. Feel any sensations on your skin. And then you can deepen your breathing and slowly, in your own time, start to come out of the meditation, move your body, and open your eyes. Now that we've practiced wisdom and considered the implications of it, I hope you have a new concept to work with in your mind and hopefully take it out in the world and practice it, think about it. And so I wanted to share a few common questions that come up when we talk about this idea of wisdom. So the first one is that when we think about the concept of things coming from the mind of the perceiver, things coming from me, does that mean that we can simply shift our perspective and see it in a different way? So, for example, could I choose to see a pen as a chew toy? And it's a great way to think about it, and we have to contemplate it. And I'll say that the tradition I study in clearly says that, in fact, no, it's not as simple as just shifting our perspective in the moment. That if I'm in a scenario where someone really is appearing to me as angry and they're yelling at me, that I can't just shift my perspective and choose to see that as something else. And that actually that's not the idea. That's not the implication. What they're saying is that if it is appearing that way, it's real for you. It's true for you. That plastic cylinder really functions as a pen for you. It's only saying that that's not the only function of the pen. That's not the only function of the plastic cylinder. And that there could be other interpretations of that object that are equally as valid for that type of mind, for that perceiver. And that someone else who is witnessing a boss yelling could have a different interpretation that is valid for them. And so if we understand that, the next question that comes up is, well, then how do we shift it? What's the point? And that has to do with if we understand that our mind has something to do with the experience, with the interpretation, it then becomes about our response to the objects, our response to the interpretation. And knowing that it's valid, but still responding with the type of future interpretation or future experience we want to have. So in the example of the yelling boss, if I'm forced to see someone angry and yelling at me, I would choose not to respond with more anger and more yelling, because a seed, a mental imprint of anger and yelling can only produce something similar in the future. And the same goes for an instance of kindness or an instance of love. That must also have a consequence that is similar to the cause. So a moment of love would create a future experience of the same thing, of love. Okay, so I hope that that answers some of the common questions that come up with this idea of wisdom. And that's all we have time for in this session. but I hope that you've found something you can take with you and practice. And then I hope that you'll check out my profile where you can see previous sessions and also know when the next upcoming session will be. So it's been a pleasure to meditate with you. I look forward to seeing you the next time.